One more question from me, and then I'm going to turn it over to Yolande for audience questions. And I want to take you to the multilateral now, because we've really been talking primarily on bilateral, but you made mention of the multilateral with regard to the Paris Agreement and climate change and a global challenge. You know, something has been lost over the last 4 years with regard to American leadership generally. I think that's almost universally accepted. At the same time, there are strong expectations with regard to a return to more of a traditional role for the United States, more of a traditional role with regard to multilateralism. I noticed in the last couple of days there was talk of the president-elect, once in power, holding a meeting of democracies, which would be really interesting given some of the steps we've taken in the last few years to strengthen traditional multilateralism. How can we best help, assuming that the Biden administration is taking new steps onto the international stage, more in the tradition of American leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think first and foremost, we help by maintaining our constant commitment to these organizations. There are certain global problems that will only be solved through global cooperation. And we've seen that with the pandemic, but we know that that's true with respect to international security issues. And as you mentioned, this Democracy Summit, I think, is a really interesting signal of where this administration wants to put some of its international energies. So that is really exciting. I do think that it's important to recognize that some of these institutions while they have a vital role in addressing and solving the challenges that we face as a globe, they also are useful to us to the extent that they are forums for solving problems, moving things along, making our world safer and cleaner and stronger and better, and the lives of people better. And so some of the criticisms, and I say this from sitting here in the United States, some of the criticisms of some large multilateral organizations comes from the fact that they are maybe less efficient and less effective than some Americans, and this is not coming just from the Trump administration. This comes very much from Congress here in the United States, who do have criticisms around the effectiveness of some of these organizations, and that's not necessarily a partisan issue. So I would say that we should be embracing, obviously, and we are, a future Biden administration's re-engagement in the global multilateral community. But if we really want to be helpful, we should be listening to the concerns that might be coming from inside the United States, including maybe inside his own party, of how sometimes these organizations aren't quite doing what they have been set up to do, or how they could be better, or how they can be more efficient. Because I think that will help the president-elect maintain strong support within his own country for continued strong U.S. leadership within these organizations.
Right. Yolande, over to you, and some audience questions, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for that. Maybe as a first question that I'm seeing here on the board in relation to what you were just touching on in America's and the government's probably, I think it's safe to assume, change in approach with respect to multilateralism and engagement in international organizations, but specifically with respect to the World Trade Organization, without going over everything that the Trump administration has had pretty strong views on that. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you see this new Biden administration as approach towards the World Trade Organization?
It's a bit too soon to answer that question in any great detail. I think we can start by recognizing that the Biden administration the incoming Biden administration has sent pretty clear signals that it's committed to multilateral cooperation, that they're committed to rules-based international trade, and the WTO is the cornerstone of the global institutions of rules-based international trade. I think that there are challenges within that organization that will need to be addressed. And this takes me back actually to my answer to the previous question. You know, before President Trump was elected, under President Obama, I was actually living in Geneva and working to our mission to the WTO for part of the time that President Obama was president. At that time, the US already had strong concerns about some of the aspects of governance of that organization. So this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of concern from US lawmakers from both sides of the aisle around whether or not these organizations are working as they were meant to work. So too soon to tell the specifics of what a new Biden administration might do at the WTO. I am sure that they will be committed to trying to work with the organization and with the other members of the organization to have concerns addressed. But I'm also pretty sure that some of the concerns that have been fairly long-standing by the U.S. in Geneva will continue to be there, and will need to be looked at carefully.
Interesting. So we can't expect a very quick pivot there. Can I? There's a question on the board on transition, and I don't mean so much on commenting on the transition between the Biden administration and the incoming Biden administration and the current Trump administration, but I most interpret the question as if you could give us a look at behind the curtains, behind the scenes. You touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the interview in terms of your contacts already with the Biden team, given that they worked with the Obama administration. But what does it look like for an ambassador team to transition into a new administration from now until January 20th?
Okay, so what I will start by telling you that for months now, many months now, my team here in Washington, myself and my team here in Washington and our network across the United States has been following very closely the campaigns, not only of the two candidates for the presidency, but also, this year, a third of the Senate was up for re-election and the entire House of Representatives. So in the regions of this country, our teams follow the platforms of those individuals. We follow them here in DC, and of course we follow the presidential platforms as well. So we have been doing policy analysis on what some of these platform ideas would mean for Canada for quite a long time. And in doing that policy analysis, we reach out to our contacts here and across the country to understand what some of these policy positions might mean. So during the election campaign, we didn't obviously talk to the campaign team for the Biden campaign, nor frankly did we talk to the Trump campaign team. That's not what we do. But now that the election is over, some of those advisors have been officially named. Some of the teams that are dealing on specific issues have been officially named, and a lot of those people we know. So we call them up and we talk to them and we ask about where their priorities are, where they're at, what they're doing now. Maybe we ask about some of the things we've read and what they mean. We give our ideas as to how we think what we're hearing would really be an opportunity to collaborate with Canada. If we have concerns about some of the early statements that are being made, we express those, and we start to gather information, but also put Canadian positions into the mix as these groups are being formed. While we're doing that, of course, as everybody knows, there's only one government at a time, right? And we are still working every day with the Trump administration and their entire team at the White House and across all agencies. And we do have interactions and files that we're working with them on every single day. So the border is one that's obvious that I deal with a lot, but we're dealing with the Ag Department, and we're dealing with the Border Services, and anyway all across the board. There are many different files that continue to move along even though we're in the beginning of transition, because that administration remains the government, and there's still stuff that we can get done between now and January 20th. So we're going to try and do that.
Well, thank you. So maybe in that spirit, we have a question a little bit on vaccines. I'm sure that was most likely one of the issues and topics in that transition, in those conversations. And of course, the whole concern with the announcement that came today, Pfizer last week. How really confident can we really feel about getting these vaccines out in a timely order with anti-vaxxers and vaccine nationalism, and also our reliance on external manufacturing?
There's a lot in that question. I guess I would start by saying that, so the Canadian government has worked really hard to secure a range of opportunities for vaccines for Canadians. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. We've got a variety of different purchase agreements that are in place to make sure that we can have vaccines for Canadians when they are approved and safe, and we know that they're going to be effective in the fight against COVID. We also belong to an international COVAX organization that gives us access to a host of other treatments and vaccines through an international cooperation partnership. So in terms of Canada and Canadians and the safety of Canadians, that work is being covered by the fact that we are pursuing many opportunities simultaneously. You also asked in your question sort of, distribution and how that would work, and people that are hesitant about vaccines. Two different questions. I guess the first, on distribution, there is an awful lot of discussion that goes on around the distribution of vaccines nationally and internationally. So there are conversations, and this is not part of my job as Canada's ambassador to the United States, but there are conversations around what would the fair and equitable distribution of effective vaccines be within our own country and on the international scene. And here in the U.S., they're talking about that too, and the Biden administration is definitely having that as part of its preparation of a COVID plan. In terms of people who may be hesitant to take the vaccine, I guess I'd come back to what I said at the beginning about generally our country's approach to the pandemic overall. We have been, not just at the federal level, but all of our leaders across the country have been very consistent in making sure that our scientists and their very best advice is being disseminated to the public. And, we see this. We see the health authorities at the federal level and across the country at the provincial level doing press conference and explaining the situation and giving advice and making recommendations and coaching Canadians on how best to protect themselves and giving them the facts. And I do think that will be critically important throughout all the next stages of this process, and hopefully will give the people comfort that we are and have been since the beginning basing our advice to Canadians on science and expertise and really making sure that we have the best science available for their care. So hopefully that will diminish any concerns that people might have about taking vaccines once there is one that is clearly recommended and safe and approved.
Great. Drew, I don't know if you had, I do have still a few questions, but I see we only have a couple of minutes left, so I didn't know if you wanted to interject at this point and ask.
I just want to make one point that I found interesting. There was a chart, I think, in The Economist the other day that showed that we've actually bought, Canada, more vaccines per capita than any other country in the world, which I found fascinating. And it tracked a whole bunch. I actually want to ask you a different kind of question. I know the time is running out. I think outside your office are photos of all your predecessors as ambassador in Washington. If I've got my count right, there are 23. You're the 24th. They were all guys until you. I actually want to ask you, Washington is, the most important posting for ambassadors globally. How common is it now in 2020 in the ambassadorial ranks for female ambassadors? How common is that? I know Great Britain has a female ambassador, and this, how common is it?
Not as common as it should be. So there are, yes, I have my German counterpart is a woman, my New Zealand counterpart is a woman, the UK ambassador is a woman, the Mexican ambassador is a woman. I'm trying to think, Sweden, and one of the Arab countries, I believe it's Saudi Arabia. I haven't met her, but she's also a woman. I'm sure there's a few others. I'm sure there are, but these are a few Europeans and one Saudi Arabian and perhaps a few others. Not common. And in fact, most of those women that I've mentioned are their country's first female ambassadors to the United States as well. So it feels like we are at a sort of a moment of inflection where many of our countries are doing this on purpose, or women have now are old enough, I guess, having come through the ranks to be experienced enough for a job like this. I don't know exactly what the reason is, but I know that for the German, the New Zealander, and the Mexican, all three of them are the first women ambassadors from their countries. I'm not sure about my British colleague, but.
I notice with regard to speculation, I know you don't want to get into speculation with regard to cabinet, but female representation in terms of the people being talked about for Biden administration cabinet positions, including senior roles, defense, which would be a first, Secretary of State, Treasury, a lot of discussion along those lines too, something approaching maybe 2015 in Canada, but that's speculation, I suppose.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that the Biden team has put together these teams that look at each of the policy areas and the agencies and departments in the federal government. And if you look at those, you'll see that they have put together a very diverse set of, within each team there's quite a bit of diversity, sort of regional diversity, but ethnic diversity and gender diversity, and sort of on the Democratic, within the party, diversity in terms of different sort of perspectives from within their own party. So he seems to be working pretty hard to bring a lot of different voices to the table and backgrounds and perspectives.
It's great. I can't think of a better note to end on from there. Unfortunately, we're already out of time. So Her Excellency Kirsten Hillman, thank you so much. Drew Fagan as well. That was really exceptional. And I can see by the questions that we had coming in that there's so much, not just interest, but intrigue and fascination as U.S.-Canada relations continues to be a priority for the country. So thanks again to our lead partners, CIBC and Microsoft, as well as our supporting partners, Business Development Bank of Canada, Bell, Bespoke, Canadian Bankers Association, the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada, the Canada Pension Plan Investments, Deloitte, the National Public Relations, and the Globe and Mail. I know you enjoyed this session as much as I did, so come on back on Thursday for our next session on the 19th from 2 to 3, where we'll be having a chat with the President and CEO of BCE and Bell Canada, Mirko Bibic. So please join us there, and don't forget to check the Feed Loop and PPF website for all the latest on the Rebuild Canada Growth Summit. Merci d'être avec nous et je vous retrouve jeudi après-midi à 2h pour la prochaine session. Bonne fin de journée. Bye everyone.